Hey, welcome to Capturing Christianity. My name is Cameron Bertuzzi, and today I'm answering Berean questions. What is a Berean? They are supporters of our ministry. If you go to our Patreon, it's actually linked in the description of this video. You can become a Berean, which is basically just a private Facebook group that we have set up for our supporters. It's also like the best Facebook group on Facebook. It really is that good, and everybody in there will tell you the same thing. It's a really good group. It's a lot of fun. And so what I decided yesterday actually was I wanted to ask the Bereans, give me some questions, ask me anything. And I had a feeling that I was going to get some really good questions. So I've got questions on anxiety, what are my theological views. Scott Clifton, who you know as TBS, he's he's an atheist, but he's also a supporter. He'll be on the channel actually in just, I guess it's coming up pretty soon here in just about a month. We'll be having a dialogue with Dr. Craig on the Kalam cosmological argument. He asked me two questions. I'll get to those throughout this stream today. Don't know how long we'll actually go. This is my first time doing this. I've got these questions queued up, and why don't I go ahead and just pull it up, and why don't we get into the first question? So I've got these all like, you know, I've got it on the screen so you can read it and stuff. So I spent some time trying to put these questions, make them look nice, and you can read them on the screen and everything. So just let me know if everything looks good, sounds good, and yeah, it's a new thing that I'm trying out, so let me know if you like it. So I'll also, in the after this is done, I'll have everything split up so that you can jump to different questions that you'd like. So look in the description of this video if you'd like to jump to a specific question that sort of piques your interest. So, all right, with that, let's get into the first question, which is from Tyler Knabb, and his question is, isn't it about time that you have Tyler McNabb back on? He's my favorite philosopher. So I think who he's referring to is the guy that couldn't convince me of Catholicism. I think that's the Tyler McNabb that he's referencing here. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure. But in seriousness, we actually are planning a stream with Tyler in around February. I know that's kind of a ways away right now, but he's got a new book coming out around then. So that's what we have. We'll plan that. We'll probably do some other stuff with Tyler, but we will have Tyler back on. He's a friend. He's awesome. All right. Here's the second question. These are super challenging. I'm telling you guys. Who are your favorite people, and why is it the Bereans? The Bereans are literally my favorite people. Well, really? Okay, so my favorite people are my family, but the Bereans are kind of my family. So yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's also true. I mean, yeah, it's the Bereans. All right, third question. We'll move these pretty quickly. So some people in the live chat were saying, are we going to get to any like questions from the live people watching live? We may get to some. I don't know. We've got 21 that we want to get through, or that I want to get through. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, David Dockery. So we're getting to some serious questions here. It says, how do you feel Christian academics can better serve people outside the academy? This is a really good question. I mean, I deal with a lot of academics. As you know, I interview a lot of them on my channel. So there's one, I would say there's one probably a consistent thing that I think academics could do better at. And that is spending some of their time learning how to communicate their ideas. So, I mean, part of my ministry, part of Capturing Christianity, like my goal is to literally expose the intellectual side of Christian belief, and part of that involves interviewing these different experts, scholars, and theologians and philosophers and apologists. So, like, that's part of my goal. But in addition to that, they can also be doing their own work. I mean, for me, like, I know personally, like, there's a specific kind of book that interests me, or like subject matter that interests me. Epistemology, metaphysics. There are different topics that I'm super interested in, and so I'm like naturally going to gravitate toward reading those types of books, on those topics. So I think the same is probably true of most people, including academics. So whatever topic they're currently interested in, that's what they're actively reading. But if academics want to get more involved, and yeah, if they want to be able to communicate their ideas better, then it just makes sense to like pick up a book on how to communicate effectively. And it's not like, I mean, some people are just sort of naturally talented at communicating. but it doesn't come natural to everybody. I mean, there are academics I know personally who really put a lot of time and effort into communicating, into learning how to like package their ideas so that they can be more accessible, more easily digested by like the popular audience. So it does take some effort, but I think that just like with anything, don't look at it as like too daunting or like you can't actually do it. You could do it if you spent, just pick out like 4 books a year to like read on how to communicate. And I bet you'd learn a lot and you'd be a whole lot more effective at communicating. There's one book that I'll recommend if you're an academic watching this and you're kind of getting convicted by some of the things I'm saying right now. There's a book called Made to Stick. Go look that book up and read it. I've read it myself and it's actually helped me in communicating my ideas. So just pick up some more books and put some time and effort into being able to communicate your ideas better. And I think that would help and serve people outside the academy. Okay, let's get to the next question here. This one is from Carl Rogers. He sent in 2 questions, so we've got another follow-up from him. He says, what's the future of the Berean Patreon tiers? So I think he's just talking about the Patreon tiers. We have like all sorts of different tiers on our Patreon. If you go to our Patreon, linked in the description of this video, and you want to support the ministry, there's all different things that are tiers of support that you can do. And at each of those tiers, you get access to something, you get some more stuff. So the higher up ones, we've got like a Marco Polo small group, and we've got like one-on-ones at like the $150 tier. And the basic issue that's been happening, I suppose, the last couple months is that none of us have really been using this Marco Polo small group. And so we're trying to figure out different ways of doing it. I've talked with the guys. It's been a while now, but what I want to say is that I'm completely open to ideas. So Carl, or if anyone else watching this, if you are one of the supporters and you'd like to see some different benefits, maybe from some different creators that you've seen, they've done different things, let me know. Give me some ideas and how we can make this work for everyone. So if you've got some ideas on how we can kind of rework the tiers of support, let me know. I'd love to. I'm super open to ideas. All right, here is Carl's next question. And so this one is, it's an interesting question about stranger evangelism. I'll just read it out loud. What are your thoughts on stranger evangelism where you hand out tracts to people you don't know versus the long-term relationship building type of evangelism? So this is kind of, it's an interesting question because I've never done that. I've never gone out and like handed out a tract. I've seen tracts like in the trash. I've also seen them like on the ground, like littering. People just like throw it on the ground. So, I mean, there are definitely some bad things about handing out tracts. I mean, in COVID times and stuff, we're doing a whole lot better at that these days with all the vaccines and out that are in the US, but a lot of the world still isn't there. So I kind of worry about that too, if you're just like handing stuff out. But so here's another negative thing about handing out tracts is that most of the things that I've seen, there was one where it was like disguised as like $100 bill, and then you pick it up and you open it and it's like not $100. It's like something like try to convince you to accept Jesus into your heart or something. There's a lot of like really cheesy tracts that I've seen. Basically every single tract I've seen was very cheesy. That said, I think that there might be a way that you could do it that's not cheesy. That you could, I mean, the way that I market my own ministry, Capturing Christianity, it could be done just like a little business card. You put a website on it and just have something short and sweet, and like that's all that you do. But I still worry about the littering aspect of it. I don't want just like all of these tracts laying. If you're like in a busy intersection in the city, you're handing out all of these tracts. A lot of them are probably going to wind up on the ground. And then also, I mean, you say, Carl, versus the long-term relationship building type of evangelism. I mean, there's a lot of benefits. I mean, just on the face of it, of like, it's a good thing to build a relationship with somebody. It's a good thing to like help coach them and be involved in their sanctification process. Like it's really good things. And you can't really do that with the tract. So not completely against tracts. I think if you could kind of rework it, I mean, I'm not going to do that anytime soon. But if that's what you're into and you've got a way that works for you and you can address these concerns, then yeah, Yeah, I don't see why not. All right, get to the next question here. We're powering through these pretty quickly, actually. Well, maybe the questions later on that are a little bit more philosophical may take a little bit more time to talk about and unpack. Brian Nicholson, do certain neurological problems impact a person's free will and or accountability? Would a psychopath be held equally accountable as someone with empathy? So this is a really good question. I mean, I'm not the free will guy. I'm not the moral accountability guy. But I do have some thoughts, and I'm not going to completely just like ignore this question. It's a good question. So basically, to reiterate the question, do neurological problems impact a person's free will and or accountability? And by accountability, I assume you mean moral accountability, moral culpability. Can you still be held accountable for your actions, even if you've got some like neurological thing happening? I'm going to damage whatever. So the answer is yes and yes. So neurological problems can affect free will. They can affect moral accountability. So one way to think about it is that the lower animals, so like non-humans, a lot of them don't have free will, even if you think that humans do have free will, which, I mean, I know that that's obviously controversial. There are compatibilists who think that there's both free will and sort of determinism happening at once. That's the whole idea behind compatibilism. Free will is not incompatible with things being determined how they are. There's the free will view, and then there's just the determined view that everything is determined. There's no free will at all. So it's a controversial subject. But if you do think that humans have free will, you're probably still going to believe that it's somewhere down the line in terms of animals, you're going to hit a point where this animal doesn't have free will. Like, I mean, if we go low enough, like houseflies, we deal with a lot of houseflies in our house. It's awful. And we've got traps set up everywhere. That's been one of my things this summer, is to like get rid of all of these flies. But it doesn't seem to me like houseflies have free will, right? But what's one of the big differences between a housefly and a human? I mean, one of the more significant differences is the difference in cognition and neurology. We've got very advanced brains that a housefly doesn't. So you might think that neurology does have something to say about whether or not an animal or a human has free will. So when it comes to damage, I would just say, like, I don't know where that cutoff is. Like, I don't know what. So if I'm not entirely sure if like infants have free will. I think that, I mean, I am a libertarian, so I think that we do have free will, but I don't know when that actually happens. I don't have like some kind of cutoff. I mean, in the same way, here's an analogy to think about it. Like, I can barely grow a beard. Like, I don't know if you noticed that. That's the reason why I don't like actually grow it out. I would if I could, but I can't. But here's what I'm getting at with this, is that it's not like there's a cutoff of like how many hairs a person has to have on their face in order to constitute a beard. It's not like once you have 1,000 hairs and they're so long, then you've got a good beard. It's not like there's this hard cutoff of how many hairs you've got to have. So I also, in the same way, I don't know that there's some kind of hard cutoff when someone has or doesn't have free will. But I do think that neurology plays some kind of role. And so I basically just don't know where that is. I mean, it's kind of a long way of saying I don't know. But I do think that neurology and sort of damage and stuff can have an impact. Basically, the same exact thing goes for moral culpability, moral accountability. Pretty much anything that is not a human, we don't think it has moral accountability or that they're morally culpable for their actions. So the same is true of a lot of children. Like my son, he's 3 years old and he does a lot of things. I mean, so we don't think that children, the point is that we don't think that, I mean, once you reach a certain age, and that's another thing. It's basically the same question of like, where's the cutoff? I don't know. I don't know when a human being starts to have moral accountability. But one of the differences between a child and an adult is their cognition, their level of cognition. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some kind of cutoff. I just don't know where it is. And when it comes to brain damage and how much they've been affected, because brain damage comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and it's like, it may be like a case-by-case basis. I don't really know. I don't really have the answer. But nevertheless, I do think neurology and these other like free will and moral accountability. I think that they do interact, and it's just a kind of a complex subject. Okay, let's get to the next question. Thanks for sending these in, guys. Yeah, these are great questions, and it's not that the questions that we normally get in the Q&As aren't good, but it was just kind of, this is different. It's fun. So again, let me know in the comments if you're enjoying this, if you like this, if it's different. I mean, it is different, but if you like it, let me know. Okay, from Natalie Lotska. Oh, and I should have mentioned this at the very beginning. Thank you guys for being Bereans. Thank you for supporting this ministry. Every single person that you're seeing on this list is a supporter of Capturing Christianity. So thank you guys so much for making this ministry possible. I mean, there's no way that I can do this. It's a crowd-funded ministry. So there's no way I could do this. There's no way we could put on conferences. No way that I could put out all these videos a week without your support. So thank you guys so much. It's incredible. And you guys don't have to do it. You don't, but you do. So thank you. Okay, Natalie Lotska. I have a difficult time wrapping my mind around arguments such as the Kalam cosmological argument and other philosophical arguments for the existence of God. Arguments such as William Dembski's specified complexity arguments feel a little bit more tangible and relatable to me, and I find them to be very persuasive. For that reason, I lean toward using intelligent design-based arguments for the existence of God. Because so many in the apologetics world seem to focus on philosophical arguments, I'm wondering if there are flaws in the arguments like specified complexity that make philosophical arguments more persuasive and less vulnerable to criticism. This is such a good question. I wish I could give a better response to it. The reason why I can't is because I'm just not super informed on the arguments for intelligent design. Natalie, you're saying that you're like the arguments from biology and a specified complexity, like those arguments come more natural to you. I'm the exact opposite. So like when it comes to anything related to biology, like physics even makes a whole lot more sense to me. But when we're talking about biology, and I was never good at that in school, it never interested me really. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of interested to learn that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but what am I going to do with that? I don't know. So biology, those topics just, they've never done it for me, so to speak. So I'm just the complete opposite. So I haven't really looked into these arguments and be able to say whether or not, they've got some major flaw. I will say this, that I've talked to, so as I was going through my journey, at the very, I suppose, start of it, I was very active on the Reasonable Faith forums, and there was a guy, I think his name was Geneticist. It was just his like username. And I think he was known as like an evolutionary biologist, but he was also a Christian. He was a scientist. And so I asked him in one thread one time, I was like, okay, what's wrong with like, I knew about the argument from irreducible complexity from Michael Behe. And I was like, okay, so what is wrong with this argument? And what he responded to me, and I don't remember the details because it was so long ago, I just remember being like, okay, yeah, maybe irreducible complexity, not that great of an argument. And at that point, I was just like, yeah, this ID stuff, I'm not really sure about it. I'm like, not super interested in those arguments to begin with. And yeah, it kind of seems like there's some really good responses to it. So I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not into it. So I've focused my work on, contingency arguments, and I haven't really done a whole lot in epistemology and like reformed epistemology and whether or not we need arguments to rationally believe in God's existence. But those topics really get my attention a whole lot more. So yeah. Oh, I did want to mention this before I leave this question, Natalie, is that this topic obviously interests you. So if you haven't checked out my 2 interviews with Dr. Ardern and Dr. Rope, go check those out. We talked about how they're both Christians, and they also both accept evolution. And in one part of the second interview that I did with them, we talked about some of the evidence for evolution. So that's probably something you'll be interested as well. But basically what they argue is that even if evolution is true, that is still evidence for theism. It's evidence against atheism. So that's really interesting. It's kind of a newer type of argument that you don't really see a lot now, because I think it is pretty new. But it was really cool. So yeah, if you're interested, that sounds interesting, go check out those 2 interviews that I did with them. They were a little bit on the long side, but if that's what you're into, then you're going to love every second of it. It was awesome. And they both put so much work in the presentations that they did. It was really, really informative. All right, let's get to question number 8. So from Ben Whittington, isn't it about time that you have Tyler McNabb back on? He's my favorite philosopher. So Ben, I'm still not, is that the guy that couldn't convince me of Catholicism? I actually wrote that joke, and the second time I said it, it wasn't that funny. So, Tyler, I'm sorry. You're awesome. Tyler, I love you. And, yeah. That joke it wasn't as good the second time. But, yeah, Ben, thanks for your question. Okay, let's get to the next one. All right. Justin Gatlin. Is that British? Should I say it? Who has been the most helpful person? I can't do an accent right now. I'll just read it normal. Who has been the most helpful person to your sanctification? Thinking practical, not apologetics. Thinking practical. So the most helpful person would probably be, and I haven't met him, but hopefully I will one day. If I don't meet him in person, then I'm hoping to have him on for an interview. The guy's name's Tim Keller. So I've listened to a lot of his sermons. Everything that he has to say is super, super good. I remember working through a series that he taught on sin, like the 7 deadly sins, and that was super helpful for me. And I mean, just understanding at the very outset, before he started talking about each individual sin, he talked about just sin in general, and he very systematically showed how sin is very irrational, even though like we're all drawn to it. It was really helpful to understand that from a biblical perspective. And so Tim Keller's been amazing in that respect. But there are 2 other guys who have assisted me and helped me through my sanctification process. One of them, he probably doesn't know this, but Matt Frad, like he texted me the other day some Bible verse, and I was just like, man, this is so good. And I needed it. That day I was having a really bad day with migraines and stuff, and he sent me this verse, and it helped me out a lot. But Matt and I stay in touch, as you guys know, Matt Frad from Pints with Aquinas. And yeah, so yeah, he's awesome. And then also another guy, Josh Rasmussen. He and I are friends, but recently we've become sort of deeper friends, and we talk about outside of philosophy and stuff. We also now talk about personal issues, and so we're really, really good friends. So he's also helped me in realizing some stuff lately that's kind of been blowing my mind. So yeah, those are 3 people that have had an impact on me in terms of my own sanctification. Which, I mean, I'm not saying I'm anywhere close to being sanctified. I'm just saying they've been helpful. Okay, so number 10 from Audrey Bartosz. I have no idea why I said it like that. All right, so she has 2 questions, and in the later ones I like split them up. So like I don't know why I didn't do that here, because these are like 2 distinct questions. So the first question, I'll answer that one first. What is your spiritual routine, and how do you keep yourself accountable on such matters? So the bad thing is that I don't have a routine for anything. I don't have any kind of routine for anything. So I get up and I have like things that I need to do that day just because I have to do them, like take my son to school. I mean, that's like my responsibility as a parent. I have to take him to school every day. So like that's part of my routine, but it's not like I've planned all my different things out during the day. Like I have things that I kind of want to get done, but it's all in my head. Like I don't have a planner. I don't have a routine for much of anything. I'm not saying that that's good. I'm just saying that that's kind of just how I am. So, and also it's important to note that my wife is basically the complete opposite. So that makes things interesting. But my spiritual disciplines, yeah. Okay. So this is still, I'm trying to remember which part of the question I'm answering here. So my spiritual disciplines like Bible reading and prayer basically are kind of sporadic at this point. And again, I'm not saying that this is the way that they should be, or I'm just telling you sort of what goes on in my own life. It's that my Bible reading and my prayer is very sporadic. I will say that because my wife is so awesome at keeping routines, is that every single night we sit down, we pray with our kids, and then we read them a book, and then they go to bed. So we do have that kind of routine where we're praying every day with our kids. And so that I think is really good. So, and that my wife is awesome. Okay, so the next part of the question is also, how do you keep the relational aspect of your relationship with God? How do you keep the relational aspect of your relationship as opposed to a mere intellectual aspect? So there's one thing I would say, there's one thing I heard, a guy named Kalam Miller, who's been on my show a bunch. He said something a while back, something like, even if I mess up, I'm loved by a perfect God, and everything will be okay. He said something like that in passing, or like, I don't know. I don't even know what it was. I don't remember the context at all. But when he said that, I was just like, you know what? That's such a good like way of looking at things. And it also helps like it can help keep you grounded in remembering that it's not just that you've got this argument for the existence of this random abstract being. No, this person, like, he created the universe out of love, sent Jesus here out of love, and all of it, like, it's all love. And he loves you perfectly. And so remembering that is really helped keep me grounded relationally, I would say. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question. Is I think about that probably not enough. I should probably think about it every day, but that's a realization that happened fairly recently that I've been thinking more and more about. Okay, let's get to the next one. Ruben Delu. Ruben, I've seen you around everywhere, and I have no idea how to pronounce your name. Delu. I'm sorry. This is bad. Sorry, Ruben. Tell me how to pronounce your name at some point in the Bereans or somewhere else. All right. Okay. And this is also a serious question, so I shouldn't be joking around. He says, my wife struggles with anxiety, emetophobia, emetophobia. Actually, I had to look this up, and so I'll talk about that in a minute. But he says she wants to know, she's a Berean too, if and when you would consider that fear turns into disobedience. So this is a really interesting question because I don't really understand it. I don't understand how fear can turn into disobedience. I don't even really understand that concept, but I do have some things to say. So the first thing to say is that I actually had to look up what this fear is, what this phobia is. And it's basically a disproportionate fear of vomiting, which I didn't know was a thing. I mean, there's so many different phobias. But as I was doing a little research, if you guys haven't come across this yet, you might be interested to learn about it. There's something called eye movement desensitization. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The acronym is EMDR. That's a whole lot easier than what I was just trying to do. Anyways, this treatment can be really effective for this type of phobia. So if you guys, I don't know how deeply you've looked into it. If it's something that you know the name of, there's chances are you probably know some of the various treatments of it. But that does seem to be a very effective treatment on some people. So maybe something to look into. Yeah. Another thing when it comes to anxiety more generally, and this has some overlap with, I was kind of reading about EMDR and what it involves. And it does kind of seem like it involves therapy. And there's something called cognitive behavioral therapy that you can use for anxiety more generally, that there's a whole lot of scientific evidence that shows that it's as effective and in some cases more effective than pharmaceuticals, which is awesome. I want to say how awesome that is because I've actually been personally in trying out all of these different anxiety medications to see if any of them help. And every single one has come with side effects that I don't want. And so I'm kind of like, how do I treat this anxiety? Is the side effect worth it? In most cases, it's not worth it. I would rather just stick with other ways of dealing with anxiety. And like the other day I was just thinking about it in the shower and I was like, I'm basically done with anxiety controlling my life. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm tired of living every day like in fear of what could happen. And if you guys don't know this, I struggle with health anxiety a lot and it's completely irrational. I'm a very, very healthy person. I guess actually more healthy now because I've been eating better and I've also been exercising. So I'm in very, very good health. And nevertheless, I've still got all this health anxiety. And so in the shower the other day, anyways, the point is that I just decided, I was like, I'm done with this. And it was just really interesting. It was really interesting how just making up my mind that I was able to really make some moves in my anxiety, which makes me think that for someone like me, and it doesn't apply to everyone because some people have more sort of chemical imbalances that need to be corrected with medicine. But in my case, I think that there's a lot of hope for something like cognitive behavioral therapy. So if that applies in your case as well, definitely look into it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was I've been reading recently on psychology and understanding why people do and say the things that they do. It's a topic that, I mean, in apologetics and stuff, it's really just done on the amateur level. It's like you get a lot of atheists, and you get a lot of theists doing it too. But a lot of atheists will go on and they'll talk about all the different things, the different psychological reasons that theists are doing the things that they're doing. And a lot of it is just, completely just garbage. They're just guessing at everything. So it's completely just on the amateur level. But in some cases it can cause doubt and cause people to really second guess things. And that's I think really the point behind it. But what I'm getting at here is that I've been wanting to look into okay, what is the actual research? What does the actual psychological literature look like? Why do people do what they do from an actual scientific perspective, as opposed to just this random person on YouTube guessing about everything? And so I've learned some really interesting things. One of the things that I've learned, and this is relevant to your question, Ruben, and for your wife, is this psychologist. Yeah, I think he's a psychologist. He makes a distinction, and I don't think that this is very scientific, but it is helpful in the psychological literature, is that basically you've got three sort of different, he calls it three different brains. So the first brain is your what's the word? I want to say tribal, but it's like your animal brain. Okay, we'll put it in those terms. Your animal brain. So your instinctive, fight or flight kind of thing. That's your first brain, is your animal brain, just basically going off of instincts. And that's where I was living basically for the last 2 months when I was dealing with these really, really horrible migraines, which I seem to be doing better now. So that's awesome news. But so the first brain is the animal brain. The second brain is the emotional brain. So all of your thought, or all of your feelings and emotions and anger and fear, and all of those are going to fit into that brain. And so it sounds like your wife, Ruben, may be kind of going back and forth between brain 1 and brain 2, which is kind of where I was. And then the third brain is the brain that you want to have. It's not that you want to have one controlling all of them. It's that you want to have all three of them sort of working in symbiosis. So the third brain is just your cognition, your upper level thinking, and rational, just rational thinking. And so if you have one of them controlling everything else, you're just going to be driven by all of your instincts and your fight or flight, mechanism that's happening in your brain. And that's what's ultimately driving all of your different actions and thoughts and everything. And so instead of that, you want all three to be working together. And so when they're not in symbiosis, you get people that are just not thinking rationally. And so the point of bringing that up is because when we go back to the question of disobedience, to me, going back, and this goes back to another question we were talking about earlier, is moral accountability. At what point does someone who is being driven, maybe consciously or unconsciously, by their animalistic instincts, at what point do you say, okay, this person is either not culpable for the things that they're doing, or they are culpable? In a lot of cases, I think that when I'm just sort of sitting here thinking about it, probably someone who is being driven by that, as long as they're not crazy or insane, then yeah, they're probably still morally culpable. But I think it does shed some light on the way that you may be able to get out of it, is that realize that you are being driven by this one aspect of your brain, whether it be your emotions, whether it be your sort of animal instincts. If you're being driven by that, then, I mean, for me, all it took was just realizing that I was fed up. I was done with it. And so, and that's not to say that I'm just going to be, good from here on out. It's just something that I'm working on daily. Anyway, I hope this is kind of rambly. I hope that any of that was helpful. Okay, I'll just move on to the next question. But thanks for sending that in, Ruben. And definitely make sure that she's getting professional help, which I know that you said that she is. So that's really good. Yeah, I would just make sure, don't just lean on things that I'm saying here. Make sure that it's always followed up with professional help. So Ryan Shields, thanks for your question. Anselm's ontological arguments was a prayer, some of which borrowed from the Psalms, and all of which was the product of a rousing of the soul to think about God. Augustine, too, prayed his way in and through issues of time, grace, time, grace, providence, and freedom in his confessions. What's your view on the relationship between spiritual practices, prayer, scripture reading, etc., and intellectual endeavors? I had to read this question a lot because, the second part of this, do spiritual practices help or hinder one's receptivity to their intellectual discoveries, and in what respects? So I was kind of reading this the opposite way around. I was thinking, do intellectual discoveries help or hinder spiritual practices? That's kind of what I was thinking at the very beginning, as I was like thinking about a kind of response to this. But as I actually read what your question was, I think that basically if we and this is me coming from a charismatic background. I grew up in the charismatic church, and let me tell you, charismatics are crazy. They do a lot of weird stuff. And if you don't know that, then you need to know it. And so the point that I want to make here is that if we let our spiritual practices get too wild and crazy, then they can obviously lead us to do some really weird things and lead us astray, maybe even completely lead us away from true Christianity and the gospel. So I'm reminded of the scripture, 1 John 4, which basically says that you've got to make sure who you're listening to, make sure that that's the scripture that says test the spirits kind of thing. But basically what it says is that make sure who you're listening to and what you're doing lines up with what Jesus taught. That's ultimately what this passage is telling us to do. So when I read that, when I think about it, it's like basically saying your spiritual practices, and that would include, I think, who you're listening to. So if some preacher or whatever, you got to make sure that your spiritual practices are logical. They're structured. They've got to line up with Scripture. So that to me shows me that there's a sort of structure over emotions, logic over emotions is sort of how all of this should work out in the end. So in my view, so long as spiritual disciplines have some sort of guidelines, and the guidelines are set by Scripture itself, then I think that they can actually work in symbiosis with intellectual endeavors. I think that's the way that you have both of them working together, is by basically putting guidelines on your spiritual practices. And I think that if you don't have that, then you're in conflict with Scripture. All right, so that's my thoughts on that one. So now we've got to Scott Clifton. He's got two questions here, and I've split them up in 13 and 14. So the first one is a great question. It's one I've thought about a lot. Why can't the universe be the first cause? And the second question is, what advantages or disadvantages does your version of the Kalam have compared to Dr. Craig's? So let me talk about 13 first. Why can't the universe be the first cause? So I've got a lot of things to say about this. And if we were in a conversation, Scott, we could probably have a great conversation about this too. But I mean, if you follow any of my work, you know that I'm convinced of the argument from contingency, especially the flavor that you get from the work of Dr. Josh Rasmussen. And so my thoughts have really been shaped by his work. So I mean, it's not to say that I just endorse everything that he says, but he and this is one of the great things about Josh, is that he encourages everybody to take what he says and think about it for themselves. Don't just like go on it because he's, got these PhD in philosophy, and like, don't just go on it because he's so smart, which he is. And if you listen to his work, or if you read his work, it's like, obviously he's a smart person. Don't just accept what he has to say because of that. Accept it because it makes sense to you. It's what you think actually is the truth. And so anyways, the point of saying that is that I think that his arguments are very, very good. I think that they're sound. I think they're compelling. So I'm not going to say a whole lot in response to this question, Scott, that you may not have heard from Josh. If you haven't read his work, then maybe some of this will be new to you. So there's a few things that come to mind when I think about the difference in theories between, like, could the universe be the first cause, or is God the first cause, or is there something else that could be the first cause? So I'm completely on board with Josh in thinking that any theory apart from a perfect being is going to be more complex than a theory that is basically just that the foundation is supreme. Josh, that's the language that he uses: supreme greatness, the maximally great being. theory, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, the thing that I call it all the time is just perfect being theology, or like, yeah, a perfect being. Anything that is any theory different than that is going to be more complex, because you're going to have to specify some arbitrary limit in value or in power that this thing can do, or a number of parts that it has. And a perfect being has none of that. It has no complexity. And so that's one area that I completely agree with Josh, is that basically any theory apart from a perfect being is going to be more complex than the perfect being. So that's one reason to prefer the perfect being hypothesis over something like, is the universe as the first cause. Also, question is like, what do you actually mean by that? Once you actually start to specify what you mean by the universe as the first cause, once you start to spell out like the concepts that are involved, you're going to like, is it particles? Is it what is it? Is it some kind of quantum field? Like, what is the universe that you're talking about is the first cause? And once you start to spell that out, the idea is that it's going to be more complex than the perfect being hypothesis. So that's point number one. Point number two is that any theory that you come up with that is not a perfect being is going to involve some kind of arbitrary limit in something. It's going to have an arbitrary limit in value. So anything less than a perfect being is going to be only finitely great or finitely valuable. And so it's going to involve an arbitrary limit. Why couldn't it be more or less valuable? Why couldn't it have more or less power? If your theory, your grand theory of the universe is that it can produce, say, like 100 universes, then why only 100? Why does it have this limit as opposed to some other limit? And this can also be seen by example of just like in our ordinary lives. Like my computer, I actually don't remember if it's got 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes of storage capacity, but that's a limit. It's got, it's some limit of storage capacity. The question is, why does it have that limit? Well, part of the reason is that that's the limit that I selected when I was building a computer to use for live streaming. But it's also explained by something else, like the people in the factory that made it and everything. So limits seem to cry out for an explanation, especially these limits that seem just sort of arbitrary. And so that's a sort of strike against the theory if it's got these unexplained arbitrary limits, where in the perfect being theory, you don't have that. So that's a strike against any non-perfect theory. That's the second thing. The third thing is that in my debate with Stephen Woodford on the Kalam, I gave it in defense of my second premise, which is that if there's a first cause, then God exists. I gave an argument from limits. And so in that argument, I basically talked a lot more about limits and how I think that limits, that when you just think about the nature of limits, they seem to be a relevant difference between the caused and uncaused. And so I basically just gave an argument from limits for God. And so that could be introduced at this point, and that could help bridge the gap between a first cause and God. So that's another place that we could go. So and then the last thing to note is that one mistake that I've made in the past, I'll explain it this way. One mistake that I've made in the past is thinking that when it comes to like the Kalam or the contingency argument, like you want to be able to get all the way to the existence of God with one argument. And in a recent interview that I did with Dr. Ted Poston, he convinced me, and he wasn't trying to do this, but I've been kind of looking at this wrong. Instead of looking at it as like trying to compartmentalize each argument. It's like this argument has to stand on its own. This argument has to stand on its own. We've got to assess the problem of evil over here by itself, problem of divine hiddenness, the cosmological arguments. We've got to like compartmentalize all of these different things and kind of like, how do you even weigh them up? Instead of doing that, you just put it all together. You like start building it into like a sort of a probabilistic framework, take all of the evidence into account, and then look at what you get up, or look at what you arrive at in the end. And so I think it would be a mistake when we're thinking about, what is the ultimate theory? What is like the correct worldview when we're thinking about the difference between theism and atheism. When it comes to contingency arguments or the Kalam style arguments, it would be a mistake to take those arguments in isolation and not look at all of the other evidence, I think. So basically I'm saying there's other pieces of evidence, from fine-tuning, from, I think that moral knowledge also points to theism. I think that consciousness points to theism. I think that beauty points to theism. And so basically I would say that once you incorporate all of these different lines of evidence, you're going to wind up at theism as being the sort of the best explanation of all of the data. So those are a couple different ways to sort of bridge the gap between first cause and God. I hope that was clear. So I talked about complexity. I talked about arbitrary limits. I talked about my argument from limits, which I spell out in my debate with Stephen. But then I talked about basically additional evidence that would be brought in. In that, you've got to look at the additional evidence if you want to build a cumulative case for whatever worldview that you've got going on. So I think that there's other evidence that suggests that God is the first cause. Okay, so the second question, Scott, that you've got is, what advantages, disadvantages does your version of the Kalam have compared to Dr. Craig's? This is another good question. It's something fun that it was fun to think about. So I think that I want to make a distinction, first of all, between version and defense. So there's obviously differences in the versions that we formulate. So Dr. Craig's version of the Kalam is, I think I might actually be getting some super chat. I'm not sure. If you guys have sent in a super chat and I miss it, I'm very, very sorry. I haven't been looking at the screen. So I'm just scrolling up here to make sure that I didn't miss any. Okay, I don't think I have. So Dr. Craig's version of the Kalam cosmological argument goes like this. If you're not familiar with it, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, premise 2, and then the conclusion, therefore the universe has a cause. So that is Dr. Craig's version of the Kalam, and he normally follows that up, not normally, but every single time he follows that up with a conceptual analysis of what a cause of the universe could look like, and he concludes that it's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, very powerful, and personal. So that's basically Dr. Craig's version of the Kalam, which on the face of it, it seems like it's fairly simple, but then the conceptual analysis part is not super simple, and then he's got all these different defenses of the premises. But so here's my version of the Kalam is premise 1, there's a first cause. Premise 2, if there's a first cause, then God exists. Then the conclusion follows, God exists. I think that some of to just look at the similarities first between our two versions. Again, there's a difference between version and a defense, but our versions seem actually similar in their simplicity. So one of the things that a lot of people talk about, one of the benefits of Dr. Craig's version is that it's so simple. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. So the universe has a cause. Pretty simple. But I mean, the way that I formulated my Kalam, it's very, very simple. Premise 1, there is a first cause. Premise 2, if there is a first cause, then God exists. Conclusion, God exists. So it seems like they're actually pretty similar in terms of their simplicity. So I think that that's, you could say that that's a good thing in favor of Dr. Craig's argument, but I think that they're equally simple. So that's one of the similarities. So one thing that I think my argument has that Dr. Craig's doesn't have, one benefit that mine has, is that mine actually doesn't explicitly reference any kind of causal principle. So Dr. Craig's version, his first premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause. In the literature, this is known as a causal principle. It's a principle about causation. So it's basically specifying some property. Everything that begins to exist, anything that has that property has a cause. That's the idea behind this principle. Causal principles, at least in recent times, have been called into question. But if you notice, my version of the Kalam actually doesn't involve a causal principle. It says there is a first cause, and then the second premise is if there is a first cause, then God exists. So I will say this, though. This is why I made a distinction between version and defense, is that my particular defense of my premises, especially my second premise, does involve a causal principle. Remember my argument from limits? That first premise of my argument from limits is that anything that is limited has a cause. So that is a causal principle. But the point that I want to make is that, you don't have to use an argument from limits in defending that second premise. You can, in the way that I did it, it does involve a causal principle. But my version of the Kalam doesn't involve a causal principle. So that's one thing that it's got going in favor of it. So one thing that I'll say that's probably more a benefit on Craig's side is that his defenses, the way that he's defended his argument, his version, is a little bit easier to comprehend than mine, because I'm talking about the relevant differences between the caused and the uncaused. I'm trying to get people to think about this argument from limits. And then if you remember, if you've watched the videos, I also gave a sort of Grim Reaper style argument for causal finitism. So there's a lot going on in my defenses of my argument that is not really going on in Dr. Craig's. I mean, Dr. Craig does have some, he's got 3 different philosophical defenses of his causal principle. And then I think he's got standardly about 4 different defenses that he gives, 2 philosophical arguments and 2 scientific arguments for the defense of his second premise. So he does, it can get a little bit complex, but I think that my defenses are a little bit more philosophical, a little bit more, it takes a little bit more abstract reasoning. So I think that's probably a detriment in the long run, because it just takes a little bit more time and effort to really understand these arguments and the way that I defend them. But again, that's not to say that that's a negative necessarily, because that's really just the way that I personally defend this argument. It's not to say that that's the only way to defend it. So there are other ways that you could defend it that may be a little less abstract, but that's up to other people to actually do. So I'll say a couple other things and then we'll move on to the next question. So I think that my defenses of my premises are actually stronger than Dr. Craig's. So because he's got to defend his causal principle, and I also defend, the way that I defend my premises, I'll just say it like this: the way that I defend the premises in my arguments, I think that they're stronger than Dr. Craig's. Now, obviously, that's a personal sort of taste issue, so that's just my opinion. And then also another benefit of mine is that it actually gets you to the existence of God, as opposed to whatever conceptual analysis that Dr. Craig winds up at: spaceless, immaterial, powerful, personal. Like that, it sounds, God has those attributes, but mine basically just literally gets you to a perfect being. So I would say that's a benefit. Excuse me. Okay, Scott, we've spent too much time on your questions. They're so good. All right, let's get to some more. We've been almost going for an hour. That's really cool. And thank you guys for sticking around. Again, let me know. I know I just went a while on these questions from Scott, but let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below if this is a cool format. I don't know. Let me know. Chandler Maynard, as of now, what is your favorite fiction and nonfiction book you have read? So my favorite fiction book is The God Delusion. Actually, I don't read a lot of fiction. I did, however, read The Hobbit in high school or in middle school. It was middle school. And I really, really enjoyed that. So it's been a while, but I did read that and I really enjoyed it. So that's my answer, The Hobbit. Nonfiction, I was thinking about that a lot. And the thing that I come back to, How Reason Can Lead to God from Josh Rasmussen, I love that book. But the book that I always come back to is God, Freedom, and Evil by Alvin Plantinga. One of the reasons why that sticks out in my mind so much is because that was really the first time that I was exposed to analytic philosophy, and it just blew my mind how someone could go systematically and demolish an argument so thoroughly in so short a time. It really opened my mind to the power of analytic philosophy, and since that point, I've loved it, and it's awesome. So that's probably my favorite nonfiction book, God, Freedom, and Evil. Okay, so moving to the next question. Number 16 and 17, 2 different questions from David Fairbairn. Fairbairn? Sorry, David. Who are your heroes is his first question. So obligatory Jesus. I've got to say Jesus is my hero. But some non-Jesus people, Dr. William Lane Craig. You guys know I'm a pretty big fanboy of Dr. Craig, even though we've got our disagreements. And I was even just talking about how my version of the Kalam is better than his. He's one of my intellectual heroes. And then I've already mentioned this other guy too, a whole bunch, Josh Rasmussen. So another person who's not just a superhero, but not just a hero, but a superhero that I really like is Thor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in particular. I really like his he's probably my favorite superhero in that universe. So I know that's not your question at all, but I had to throw it in there because I like him a lot. Okay, number 17. Oh, same one. Oh yeah, it's from David. What's your favorite restaurant or type of food? This one is super important. And I did actually want to spend some time talking about this. I probably won't spend that long. But anyways, my favorite food is Mexican food. Love Mexican food. I eat chips and salsa literally every day of my life. And even on my diet, I can eat it. I kind of eat too much of it. That's the only reason why it's bad for me, is because I eat too much chips and salsa. But I also make breakfast tacos every single morning. And if I could, there's a restaurant in Houston that I love. It's my favorite restaurant. It's called Lupe Tortilla. Lupe Tortilla. It's my favorite restaurant. Super good. They recently came out with this new salsa they started making that's like so subpar. Their old salsa was everything. So whenever you go there, you've got to ask for the old style salsa if you're in Houston or if you're planning on being here. Oh, that might be a good segue to talk about CCV1. It's coming up in just a couple months. And of course, my little things aren't working here. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, CCV1. It's our first Capturing Christianity conference coming up in literally a month and a half. It is going to be amazing. We were sold out already, but then we actually were able to open it up because COVID restrictions were lifted. So we've got about 200 tickets left. So if you're interested in coming, especially if you're in the Houston area already and you're looking for something to do around this time, then come check us out. Here's a list of speakers that we'll have there. Josh Rasmussen, Luke Barnes, Cy Gart, Lee Strobel, Liz Jackson, Trent Horn, Alex O'Connor, and Braxton Hunter. So if you saw recently, Alex and Braxton will actually be in a debate on that Friday night starting at 7 p.m. That is the only event that we will live stream. Everything else, you've got to be there for it. But the debate between Alex and Braxton, it's going to be a formal debate. So we're going to be like time speeches and then Q&A at the very end. But it's going to be really, really good. It's going to be awesome. So hope to see you guys there. Yeah. And while you're here, go visit Lupe Tortilla and ask for the old style salsa. You're welcome. Okay. Get to the next question. Number 18, David Swander. What spectrum of doctrinal beliefs, theologies within Christianity do you lean toward and why? So I don't really know how to answer this because I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place, David. I'm sorry. So I just started listing things that came up off the top of my head. So number one, I'm anything but Calvinism. Number two, I'm annihilationist. I lean toward that view, I would say. Number three, I'm a Trinitarian. Number four, I'm a partial preterist. Number five, I'm old earth. Number six, I'm not cessationist. I don't know what else to say. Like if you have a specific question about some theological question about some doctrine, then let me know. But other than that, I didn't really know what to say. So but those are some of my theological views. All right, thanks for your question, David. So just a couple more questions here from Greg Manila, who, by the way, he's a non-theist Berean. I don't know if he would identify as an atheist or an agnostic. Greg, I'm sorry, I don't know that. You might even lean toward Christianity. I'm not sure now that I'm saying all of this out loud. Anyways, you're always welcome. Your comments, your questions. He pushes back a lot in the Bereans, and it's awesome. I love seeing Greg around. All right, his question is, given substance dualism / some kind of soul and the common view that brain injuries impact the soul's ability to perceive the outside world, why should one think that the soul survives the death of the brain? So I am not the mind or philosophy of mind guy. I'm actually just starting to get into it. I picked up a book by William Hasker, which I thought I had on my desk and I don't. But he's got a really good book on dualism, I hear, and I was just starting to read that because it sort of provides a really good overview of the different views. But anyways, I did want to say that obviously, so like your question is about the brain injuries, how they impact the soul's ability to perceive the outside world. So basically there's physical to mental causation. But it seems obvious to me, as someone who deals with anxiety and just what I went through just a few days ago, there's also mental to physical causation. So like just making a realization in the shower that I'm not going to let anxiety rule over my life. I've had so much less anxiety over the past 2 days, and it's incredible. Like it's amazing. So mental to physical causation is also a thing. So I don't really know what to do with that, but I at least want to recognize that it goes both ways. It's not just physical to mental, it's also mental to physical. And I mean, that's sort of the science behind cognitive behavioral therapy. You're literally just changing the way you think, and it has all of these physical effects. It's really crazy. So one view that you might be interested in looking into, that I'm not the expert, but I have heard there's a view called dualism interactionism, which basically thinks that there's a link, or that says there's a link between the physical body and the soul. So there can be physical to mental causation, but there can also be mental to physical causation. So that might be a view that you'd be interested in learning more about. Which, I mean, that view would predict that a brain injury would affect the soul's ability to think, because there's a link, there's some kind of interaction going on, even if we don't know how exactly that interaction is supposed to be happening. That's at least that theory. So personally, I'm kind of undecided in philosophy of mind. So I don't know if physicalism is true of human persons. I don't know if physicalism is true. I don't know if dualism is true, or some variation of dualism is true. I don't know if idealism is true. I don't know. I'm undecided. So this question, I mean, it's a good philosophical question, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people who have opinions about it, but I'm just kind of undecided. I'm also not super informed on this area, so that's what I'll say about it. Okay, so 2 more questions, and they're both really good. And I'm really sorry I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'll just call you Al. I think that may have been what we did when we spoke on the on the Skype, when we talked on the Skype. What all did the resurrection accomplish? Why was it needed? So the way that you phrase this is interesting, because you didn't say what did the death of Jesus accomplish. You said what did the resurrection accomplish? So I'm going to take it that you're kind of like talking about both. You're talking about the death and the resurrection. So one thing that I'll say, I'll really just say 2 things that I'll address both. So what all did the resurrection accomplish? So one thing that I would highly recommend you go and read right now, and I can probably provide a link to this in the comments below, in a pinned comment, is a paper by Alvin Plantinga called O Felix Culpa. And well, basically in this, he gives a theodicy. It's kind of a reason that God would have for allowing evil and suffering in the world, but it's based on the atoning work of Christ and what he did in this world. And he basically goes through and he asks the question, so what are some great making features of a world? Like, what are some of the greatest things that you can have in a world? Is it number of people? Is it, acts of love? Is it acts of kindness? What are like what makes a world great? And so what he ends up arguing is that basically any world that has what Christianity has, where you've got a being that sacrifices himself out of love for people that hate him, when you have a world like that, then that's like the greatest possible world that you could have, or at least that's one of the greatest features that you could have of any great world. So I think that Alvin Plantinga actually rejects the notion that you could have a best possible world, but he nevertheless thinks that of the set of really good worlds, they're all going to include something like the incarnation and the atonement. So a really, really cool paper to read. And basically it argues that the resurrection, well, I'll say this too. So the resurrection isn't necessary, but nevertheless, it's something that you would do, any sort of loving being would do. So as an analogy, if I walked in my backyard, we've got a pool. If I walked in my backyard and I saw my son drowning, like, it's not necessary that I go and save him. It's not needed. Like, I could just sort of let him drown and, live with that the rest of my life and probably go to jail being negligent or whatever. Like, it's not necessary that I save him, but nevertheless, I will save him. There's not a chance in this world that I wouldn't save him because I love him. So that's, I guess, an analogy to think about the difference between, is it necessary? I don't know. But nevertheless, any loving person, this is what they would do. So, yeah. All right, let's get to the last question, and it's a really good question. I've said that about every question, but it's a really good one. Whoops. Did I have the wrong thing up? No, I've got myself on the screen twice. There we go. All right, here's the last question from Caleb Burial. Barrel. Caleb Barrel. Sorry, Caleb. Okay, good question. Why can't the fundamental constants and quantities of nature and the fine-tuning argument be necessary? Well, maybe they are necessary. Maybe they are necessary. The question, I guess, would be, what reason would there to be to think that the fundamental constants and quantities of nature and the fine-tuning argument would be necessary? Where's the problem? Because, I mean, a lot of things are possible, but what's actually probable? What's most reasonable? So there's a couple things to say about this. So first of all, even if the quantities and constants in nature, the things required to make a life-permitting universe, even if these were sort of metaphysically necessary, you can still actually run a fine-tuning argument. And basically the way that you would do this is you would admit, yes, these things are metaphysically necessary, but you'd basically run an epistemological argument as opposed to a metaphysical argument. So what do I mean by that? So let's suppose that all the laws and everything is necessary, the world has to be a certain way. You can nevertheless make design inferences about the world. Super interesting. You can make design inferences about the world even if these laws and laws of physics and everything has to be necessary. Everything is metaphysically necessary. So here's an example. Here's how that can work. Suppose that, when we were going to the moon, the astronauts went to the backside of the moon, which we never see on Earth, but they went to the backside of the moon and they saw that there was written out in asteroids a message. Say that it was just the whole book of John written out in Greek, but it was all, done by asteroids or something like that. Then at that point, even if it's metaphysically necessary that the laws of physics, the initial constants and quantities, everything had to be exactly set to the way that it was, we'd still nevertheless be okay, that's really weird. Something's going on. There's some kind of design, somebody wrote this message on the back of the moon with asteroids. And so the way that you would do that is through a sort of epistemological argument. So you basically say, yeah, I mean, even if things are metaphysically this way, for all we know, epistemologically, they don't have to be this way. So you just basically run a different kind of, you'd use a different modality. That's what you might call it. So instead of using metaphysical modality, you'd use epistemological modality. And so you would still get a design inference, you just do it in a different modality. So, but I think that you can just intuitively, you can see that you'd still want to make a design inference. So something's got to give. You've got to be able to, because if you're not going to make a design inference in that case, then, I mean, to me, something's wrong with you. If we went to the back of the moon and written out by asteroids or some other means, was the whole book of John written out in Greek, word for word, and you didn't conclude design from that, something wrong with you. So there's got to be some way to be able to do that. And one of the ways to do it is just to run the epistemological version of the argument. Okay, so here's another thing to keep in mind, is that if we couldn't do that, then all of our scientific reasoning is going to go away. All of our scientific reasoning is going to go away. And the reason for this is because when we reason about any scientific hypothesis, we're often thinking about ways that the world could have been, ways that the world could have been different. Think about continental drift. So we're thinking that the way that the world got the way that it is now is because it could have been in different arrangements. There could have been, we're thinking about how the world used to be with Pangea and how all the continents were together. So the way that we get to continental drift theory, where all the continents are splitting apart from each other, is because we're thinking about what would happen in a different world. And so we've got to be able to think about different ways that the world could have been. But if it was all metaphysically necessary, then you can basically arrive at any conclusion you want and just be oh, well, whatever it is what it is. My theory is correct because it's necessary that it's correct. So, but you don't really want to do that, right? I mean, any scientific theory that anybody puts out could just say, well, my theory, there might be evidence against this theory, but my theory is correct because it's necessary that it's correct. You probably don't want to do that. So you still want to be able to run some kind of other type of argument, like the argument that I gave earlier, the epistemological argument, use a different kind of modality, run that kind of argument to make your hypothesis. So, But then the last thing I'll say about this, and there's a whole lot more to say about this objection to fine-tuning anyways. I'm just going to mention a couple here. If you want more, then go check out my interviews with Luke Barnes. We've talked about this ad nauseum. So another thing that we haven't talked about, Luke and I haven't talked about in particular, is that necessary facts, even metaphysically necessary facts, can have deeper explanations. Going back to Josh Rasmussen, I was listening to a video that he put out recently, not recently, it was a couple years ago at this point, but he put out a video basically arguing that necessary facts, say like 2 + 2 = 4, can still rely on sort of more fundamental mathematical axioms. And so some of these necessary, like it's necessary that 2 + 2 = 4, but these necessary facts can nevertheless depend or be explained by something deeper. And so in the case of like these metaphysical necessary laws of nature, whatever, you could still ask the question, well, what explains these? Why are these things necessary? And so it doesn't actually follow that you're going to get out of the God hypothesis just because you say that things are necessary, like the laws of physics have got to be the way that they are. It doesn't actually absolve you of getting out of theism, because you could just say, well, maybe these necessary facts are the way that they are. There's some kind of deeper explanation. They're dependent on something else. But then the question is, what would that depend on? So it doesn't automatically follow that just because things are necessary that you've like solved everything, or that you've arrived at a brute fact. You've arrived at a fact that has no explanation. Just because it's necessary doesn't necessarily mean that there's no explanation. All right. I think that's that's it. We've arrived at question number 21, and that's all I've got to say about that. So let me scroll up real quickly. And I haven't really kept an eye on the live chat, so I don't know if anyone has sent in a super chat, or I'm sure that there have been more questions that have come in, but I'll just say this. I'm kind of tired. I've gone about an hour and 15 minutes. So, but it was great. I feel great. I could do more, but if you guys want to see more, you want to see more Q&As like this, then let me know. And if you want to become a Berean and get chances to be involved in stuff like this, then support the ministry of $5 a month or more. Head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/capturingchristianity. I've got a link to that in the description of this video. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?